so glad to have you here today on The Perspective. And my name is Mike Sherbino. And I just want you to know that at any time, if you want to talk to someone, if you'd like someone to pray for you, because we believe in prayer, there's a number, 855-910-6297. And I'm giving it out right at the beginning of the program because I just have a sense that what we're going to talk about today is going to be impactful in such a way that you might want to talk to somebody. You might want to say, hey, I just need Jesus in my life right now. I need to find my plumb line. I got to find my true north. And here to help me today is a man who went through that struggle of finding his true north. And he would tell you that there's challenges that he's dealing with all the time. He is president of Eastport Financial on the east coast of Canada, but offices across the country and now into the States. It is a growing investment firm. He's the author of 2 books, Deep Water and More Than Money. But probably he would say the greatest adventure that he's on right now is with a ministry that God put on his heart to start, which is called Fathers for Fathers. And on many different occasions, I've had Jonathan Lewis on the program, and he's back with us today. Jonathan, always happy when you're here. Thanks for coming on the show again today.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be here. I'm so glad to be with you today.
Yeah, and Fathers to Fathers, just tell people what it's all about. Many people will remember, but refresh the memories of those who can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, it's a ministry that I started last November. I got the download 13 months ago on a hike with about a dozen men in North Carolina. And it just became very evident to me 2 things. One, men need other men. And 2, I felt the Lord said, and you're ready. So go and get them, rally them. And if I had any doubt, I'll start by telling you a quick little story. So I had my annual meeting with the bank right before this. That was why I was late. And, my wife said to me this morning, well, are they taking you to the bicycle thief on the waterfront, or are they taking you to Tim Hortons? Because if it's Tim Hortons, it's not good. And if it's the bicycle thief, then they're obviously happy with you. And I ended up sharing most of the lunch with my direct commercial banker and her boss, the executive VP for the region, what we're doing with Fathers for Fathers, and we barely talked about my businesses. And both of them teared up. And I didn't know if these ladies were believers. I didn't know anything about their personal lives really to speak up, because it's a very professional relationship. And the regional director at the end of the lunch looked at me and she started to tell me her story, growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, not knowing her dad, staying in a marriage for her kids, kids not having a relationship with their dad in the wake of her divorce. And she looked at me across the table in tears and she said, Jonathan, encourage the men to not give up, to not quit, but to stay in there. So, Mike,
wow,
from vision on a mountain 13 months ago, and then my own personal journey to not being sure whether my loans were all getting called today or whether I was going to be sharing the gospel. Thank God it turned out to be the latter. I literally come into this interview with you hot, with a full heart and a full belly, compliments of my bank, where we were able to really just, bless these ladies and pour into them and realize that we are onto something. And I meant it. Yeah.
I love the power of that story, Jonathan, because that's just the reality of life. I'm thinking of some of the shows we've already produced for this week with guys that like John Tesh and Josh Broom, and they're all sharing a similar sentiment, like, let's just be real. Let's take off the mask and talk about the stuff that really counts. And John Tesh, of course, was talking about an amazing thing that he's doing musically. But then for the majority of the program, he wants to talk about his faith in God and how it's intersecting his life. and why he and his wife believe so much in the power of prayer and how that can turn things around. And of course, you know, Josh Broom, a former porn star, I think he was the #1 porn star, transformation. He's a pastor now, and it's all because of the power of Jesus. And yet in the midst of the journey, Jonathan, you know that power. I mean, you had that transformational moment when you were a teenager, when your dad drowned while both of you were diving off the east coast of Canada, and you had to pull him out of the water, and the trauma, the PTSD. But all that aside, there's still stuff that happens, isn't there? And how is it that you've kept your true north through all the stuff that you've been going through?
Yeah, I mean, you and I were emailing this morning, and actually while I was driving to the city for this lunch meeting, I had the privilege of pouring into a young guy who was trying to figure it all out. And I said, look, you know, there was a point where Jesus said to Peter, the devil asked to sift you. And he didn't say that he said no. He said, and I'm interceding and I prayed for you. And I think that the fact is we have a very distorted idea of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. But in Matthew 10:24, he said, you're not above your master. And if they did all this to me, they're going to do even worse to you. And so when I look at the last 2 years of my life, you and I were emailing this morning, and I sort of gave you a quick rap sheet. There is no part of my life that has gone untouched. My health, my finances, my business, relationships, my children, my family dynamics. When you put your yes on the table and you say, here am I, Lord, send me, you almost need to be prepared for the fact that before he sends you, he's going to have to send you to basic training. And basic training is, to summarize it, it's that moment in Job when God said to the devil, have you considered my servant Job? And Job went into basic training. And you don't even get to the end of the first chapter of Job, and the last messenger comes and says, and then the house collapsed on all your children. And so I firmly believe that it is an honor and it is a nod from our Father when he says, okay, now we're going to strengthen your spiritual muscles. We're going to develop your character, and you're going to have to go through some difficult times here where I'm going to really teach you to cling to me and stop asking why, but start asking what. Psalm 84:12, nothing gets by me that's not for your good or for my glory. So lean into me, press into me. Like my leadership team and I, we finished the day yesterday praying over our company, and not live your best life now. That's as far as I'll go with that little dig there, Mike. But with Lord, if we're on mission for you, and if we're engaged in marketplace ministry and gospel patronage in the way you want us to, then give us the resources. And if the resources we lack are not physical, but they're spiritual, the fruits of the Spirit, long-suffering patience, self-control, then keep us here until you feel we're ready. So, I've had a lot of experience in the last 2 years in basic training. And I don't mind saying my prayer life right now is, Lord, am I ready? Because I'm tired, and I wouldn't mind being that horse out of the barn again for you and be able to do some more damage for the kingdom. And I do feel like that's what's happening. I feel like he's saddling us up right now and saying, all right, it's time to go again. But, when you look at Jesus in Matthew 4, I think every believer should go and read that time of the wilderness. What was happening there, right? I think he's modeling this for us, what it looks like to spend time in the wilderness getting equipped and strengthening our resolve and our love for the Lord.
Jonathan, I got a whole bunch of questions for you. Yeah. We're going to go to a break in about 30 seconds.
Sure.
Fathers to fathers, what's one of the biggest concerns that you have for men today that they're dealing with? One of the things that they got the blinders on. Just say it. We'll unpack it in a minute.
That they're alone, and they're staying alone, and they're walking alone, and they're trying to do it alone.
And, it's so interesting because this program will be aired right after Father's Day, and you've been that God has used you to motivate churches, including my own church, to get men to walk together, not alone. And we're going to show pictures of that and stuff in the subsequent weeks. But I want to come back after this break. We're going to talk about why God wants men not to walk alone. Folks, you're listening to The Perspective with Mike Sherbino. I got Jonathan Lewis on again today with us, the founder of Fathers for Fathers. I want you to know that you're not alone today either. We have a toll-free number. You can call it at any time, 855-910-6297. There's people there to pray with you, to encourage you. Don't be alone. Reach out and call us. Stay with us. I'll be back in just a moment. Here today with Jonathan Lewis, who is the president of Eastport Financial, an investment company that's across the country of Canada and into the States. It's a huge enterprise. But in the midst of all of that, what is really heart and center to him is seeing men walk in the fullness for which God has created them, to realize their kingdom potential. One of the many things I love about Jonathan is he's not afraid to be transparent and talk about the stuff that matters. Jonathan, just before we went to the break, we talked about one of the biggest things that you see in men is being alone. Just talk to us a little bit about that. Why are we so alone, and yet everybody wants to go out? If you play hockey, you go out with the guys for a beer or something, or, we want to watch the ball game together. We're kind of in a group, but we're still alone. Explain that.
Yeah, men are really good at getting together, and we're really good at putting on the facade, the imposter syndrome. I'm sure Josh would have spoke about that. We're all guilty of it. Sometimes it's just because it's limited time, right? Because it takes real time to get vulnerable. When I did this hike last year, I made an observation, actually. The first day, there's all the posturing, who's who. The second day, guys kind of get quiet because they're trying to figure out how comfortable they feel with this group of guys, because nobody knew anybody going on this hike, right? We met maybe a couple times before the hike. And then day 3, and it always helps when it's a campfire and it's dark and you can't make eye contact because, well, we're guys, right? And from the darkness around the fire, someone says, "My dad molested me when I was a kid." And then the horse is out of the barn. And men go from being standoffish and reserved to, it's like it takes one guy with courage to give everybody else the courage and the permission to do the same. And before you know it, we pass the women, because we all know that the ladies, they're just bearing their souls 20 minutes into the sandwiches with no crust. But the guys catch up fast. And once the tears start, the next day, it's like Pandora's box, just letting all out. And I think that for men, it's a lot easier to posture and put on that false bravado. And it really takes a man or multiple men that are willing to be vulnerable, because it's not normal, but it's so cathartic for men when we do it, because we're not used to it. And Eric Weir, we were going to have him on the show join us today, but I actually had a men's get together with 34 guys at Eric's place this winter in Charleston. And I said to Eric, I want you to share your testimony, but I don't want the polished testimony. I want the unrecorded, raw. I sat at the back of the church. I was divorced. I was a 5th-class citizen. I want that testimony. And so Eric, started to pour his guts out, and the tears started to roll. And then all of a sudden, another guy spoke up when he was done, and then another guy, and then the healing started. So guys have this idea that they need to walk alone, and yet, and I'm going to share this quickly, but 2 Corinthians 10:3-5, we all know it, but I don't want to paraphrase it, Mike. I want to read it. Paul said, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God." This is my favorite part that I think men need to learn to do, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And so my challenge for men is follow my lead, follow other men's lead, follow your own lead, and taking your thoughts captive, recognizing that also, like Paul said, we battle against principalities and darkness and evil. It's not the things of this world we're up against. It's half of it's what's going on in our head. And the world would tell you that you can do it yourself, right? The 4 pillars, you just need to man up and need a workout regime. And look, habits are great, but at the end of the day, what you need is Jesus Christ. You need to get on your face before him and have a moment of contrition around your sin, own your stuff like David did and so many others, and then ask the Lord to raise you up and make you into the man that only he can make you into. And then you got to do that every day. Yeah.
Wow. That's, I think what you just said is just a whole program in itself. And so as we're processing that, I want to just at least do one tangible thing. We got about 3 minutes, Jonathan. So that actually means 3 minutes. Here's the question. I want you to help guys. Many times we use this as an excuse, but the guy will say, "Oh, I'm in the doghouse again. I'm in the doghouse." And how do you stay mentally and spiritually afloat when you do feel you're in the doghouse? Maybe it's the doghouse of business. Maybe it's a marriage. Maybe your kids don't want to talk to you. All those things can sink your boat. How do you stay strong?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of those and 20 other things are happening in my life. So, the only way I know how to do it is go to the Lord. Like, you really got to say, do I trust him? Right. And I do. Right. Job said, "Though you slay me, yet will I trust you." So if you can't say emphatically, "I trust him," then you gotta go and work on that with the Lord. You gotta, as Paul said, work out your salvation with trembling and fear, right? Because you got to be able to say, "I take him at his word in the storm," right? Second, like Peter, when you're in the storm and you're too far from the boat to get back and you start to sink, there's only one option, and it's to run to him and cling to him and cry out his name, which, when Jesus said, "Oh, Peter, you of little faith," I actually think what he was saying is, "Hey, Peter, well done. You have a little faith. Like, way to go," right? Because it's this mustard seed and who it's in, and it's Jesus. So I don't think it was necessarily a chastening. I actually think it was like, "Hey, you're my man. Way to walk on the water with that little faith." And also, we're not supposed to walk alone. Going back to what we said before the break, I am surrounded by an SAS Navy SEAL for Jesus riot squad. So there's no guy who's going to get up and just be a wrecking ball for God if he's not surrounded by strength and intercessors. And like, if you look at the leadership team of my company, I would do battle with these guys on any battlefield for the kingdom. And the partners we have in the U.S., it's the same. And I know they would do the same for me. We bear each other up, as the Bible says. So accountability and having people around you, critical. That's the church. That's the body.
Can't do it alone. Can't do it alone at all. Jonathan, we got final 30 seconds. Talk to us about Fathers for Fathers, how people can find it, how they get involved.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm excited about Father's Day, as you know. So on Saturday, we're asking men to fast. Give up something. Give up your device. Give up Doritos or whatever it is that's your vice. Get up early Sunday morning. Get into a time of prayer. Read Psalm 51. With other guys, and walk to your church, and then get humble with other men before our Father in His house. Ask your pastors to join you and lead you in this. We are obviously everywhere: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube is where our podcasts are. check out our website. And as you know, what I'm really excited about over the summer is I'm working on this immersive study for men. And I'm really hoping to have that available come the fall, Mike. And the goal is simply to be a flag bearer for men and a clearinghouse to ministries where they can get help. I'm going to send you to Josh Broom. He's going to talk to you about porn, right? And he's going to help you. We're going to send you to Teen Challenge if you got an addiction issue. We want to be a clearinghouse to get you where you can get help.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. We got to go right now. But again, I want to say to our people, if you want to talk to somebody, call us right now at that number on the screen, 855-910-6297. You're listening to The Perspective. I'll be right back. There's a story that I love to tell. I hope you'll love to listen to it. But it's of the pastor who was teaching a bunch of children at the front of a church. And the object lesson went like this. He said, what is a little animal? It's gray and has a bushy tail. What's its name? And nobody said anything. He said, what's a little animal? It's gray, has a bushy tail, and it likes to eat peanuts. And again, nobody said a word. And then he said, okay, so what is gray, has a bushy tail, eats peanuts, and runs along telephone lines? And everybody was quiet until finally a little boy put up his hand and he said, I know that the answer has to be Jesus, but for the life of me, I think it's a squirrel. Well, I smile at that story because many times we're trying to work our faith. We're trying to make it all fit together. And we say, what really is the answer? Especially when things have gone sideways. But now things get rightened. And we come to this passage in the book of Colossians chapter 2. And there's a beautiful verse that talks about how the answer is Jesus. And Paul writes, he says, for in him, referring to Jesus, the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. And you've been filled in him, who is the head of all rule and authority. Now, before we go on and talk about the next few verses, let's just pause there and think about what he's saying. Paul writes, he says, it's in him that the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. People struggle with that. People don't want to believe that Jesus is actually God. But Paul is teaching that. He says he is the source. Some people say, you know what, just tell me that Jesus is a prophet and he was a good man, and I'm okay with that. But don't tell me for a moment that he's the Son of God. Because if that's the case, I'm going to put you on the same level as a nutcase or somebody who's got a super low IQ. That just does not make sense. Jesus is not God. He just is a man. And if Jesus is just a man to you, you'll never know his power and presence. But he is God. He came as a baby. He died. He was born. He lived. He died. And then he rose again. And in doing that, he defeated the ultimate enemy, which is death. Because God wants you and I to have a relationship with him, not just when we die, but right now. And so this is the whole beauty of the situation of what Paul is talking about. He says this. He says, you have been filled in him who is the head of all rule and authority. Now, when it says in Christ, all the fullness of the deity dwells, it means actually to settle down. It means to take up residence, that's a continual state, and it points to the present reality, not just of 2,000 years ago, but today. Jesus didn't just become God, he was God, and he still is God, and he wants to be the Lord of your life today. Now, some philosophers and religious leaders wanted to minimize Christ. We want to talk about God, but not about Jesus. Don't tell me that he really was God, but he is. And if he wasn't God, there'd be no hope, no way that we could have a religion we could have a relationship with him. Do you remember a couple of days ago, we talked about the guy that was fishing, the two ice fishermen? One had the little hole, but the other one was fishing out of the big crater, and he was ready to land the greatest fish. Well, if I can use that analogy, this is the greatest thing that we could ever land, that could ever take hope of our life. And that is the fact that Christ dwells within us. So Paul says, don't be taken captive by all the philosophies and the different isms of the day in which we actually live, but be taken captive by this, that as you trust in Christ, he lives and dwells within you. His reality is that Christ is in you. That's your hope. That's what holds us together. That's what sustains us. And we find our strength, we find our comfort, and we find our encouragement by holding on to that truth. And in turn, it holds on to us.
Hi there. My name's Ryan, and I played a little bit in the NHL. I played a lot on teams, almost 60 years on teams. A guy by the name of Jim Wilder enlightened me recently. He said there's 3 types of players on your team. Every team, church team, business team, every team. Number 1, you got possums. And when things don't go well, possums play dead. Number 2, you have predators. Predators go after the possums. They're looking for the edge. Number 3 is you have protectors. And every team that I can look back on, if we had more protectors than we had predators, that was a different team. Here's my point. Jesus is the good shepherd. He's the ultimate protector. Are we growing towards being a protector? Are we growing towards being a predator? Or are we still a possum?
Glad you've been with us today on The Perspective. Whenever we talk to Jonathan, it seems like there's just a fire hose of information coming out. You hear the passion in his voice to see men do life well. And maybe you're thinking today, I haven't done life so well, whether you're a man or a woman. But the point is this, is that God wants to take what was in the past and he wants to create something new today for you. I want you to hold on to that truth because that can transform your life. It can lift you out of the pothole of life, maybe where you're stuck right now, and bring you into a new place. And it starts with saying yes to Jesus. I would invite you today just to open up your heart. Say, God, I'm going to say yes. I want to say yes to you being my leader, my Lord. I'm saying yes to you being my Savior. I'm saying yes to the fact that I've sinned, that I've blown it. But I'm saying yes to the fact that I know you love me. And if you're saying that prayer today, write to me, would you? Right away. prayer@theperspective.tv. prayer@theperspective.tv. I'll get back to you. I've got some literature I want to send to you to help you in your journey.